From New York City, I'm Steven Shalowitz, and this is the One Way Ticket Show. Hello and welcome once again to another episode of the show where we explore with our guests where they'd go if given a one-way ticket, no coming back. Their destinations may be in the past, present, future, real, imaginary, or even a state of mind, but once again, the only caveat, there's no coming back. Now, you can listen to all episodes on our website, theonewayticketshow.com. Once again, theonewayticketshow.com, or you can search for The One Way Ticket Show wherever you like to download your podcast. And while you're at it, do rate and review us, 5 stars, of course, because that really helps make it easier for all the folks around the world to find us. And also, you can follow me on all social media at Steven Shalowitz. Once again, at Steven Shalowitz. And Steven is spelt with a V. Would love to connect with you. And in fact, another way of connecting with the One Way Ticket Show is on YouTube. Because yes, after 13 years, count them, 13 years, I finally just launched our YouTube channel. So as we record this episode, what you'll find up there are just really a handful of some of our archival episodes, some of the episodes we did in the past. And then about every other week, I'll be reaching into our stash of well over 300 episodes and releasing those as well. I'll also be releasing new conversations like I'm having today with Douglas Murray. Now, Douglas is a journalist and best-selling author of no less than 8 books. They include The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, The War on the West, and of course his latest book on Democracies and Death Cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. It's published by Broadside Books, an imprint of our good friends over at HarperCollins, and we certainly hope that you pick up a copy wherever you like to buy your books. Now, Douglas is also a contributor to and an associate editor at The Spectator. He's also a columnist for my go-to newspaper. It's actually the first thing that I read when I wake up in the morning. And of course, I'm talking about the one and only the New York Post. He also is a regular for the Telegraph and the Sun. He is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and also a contributing editor to City Journal. Let me tell you, Douglas is one busy guy, so we are extraordinarily grateful that he's carved out the time to join us here on the One Way Ticket Show. Douglas, welcome to the program and thanks for joining us.
Very good to be with you, Stephen.
Well, listen, I absolutely adored the book, so congratulations on it. And I can't wait to dig into it with you. But of course, the first order of business is my issuing your one-way ticket destination of choice, as I do with all of my guests. So without further ado, Douglas Murray, if I gave you a one-way ticket, past, present, future, real, imaginary, even a state of mind, where would you go?
I think I would go to Elizabethan England, Elizabeth I's England, but only so long as I could take some penicillin with me.
Okay.
And if I could take some penicillin with me, I would hang out there because that was the greatest period of the flowering of the English language, of English writing. Writers like Shakespeare, Marlowe, and others were all milling around. I would get the opportunity to go to the theatre most nights. I could go to the Globe Theatre. I could see Shakespeare's cast performing. I could see the plays coming on for the first time and see whether or not the audiences knew that they were at a moment in history. So I think I'd do that.
And what would you like to do then in Elizabethan England, apart from going to see the plays? I mean, what would have been your profession?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know. I'd like to think I'd be a writer. Well, I've never tried my hand at rhyming couplets or verse, so I don't know. But it would just be wonderful to be among a flowering group of writers like that, because as we know, all creative eras tend to work because a group of people are in a sort of rivalrous competition and much more with each other and knock each other to higher and higher heights. So I think that would be it. But who knows? Maybe I'd just be an innkeeper chucking unsuccessful playwrights out of the bar.
Okay, there you go. It's a whole new career ahead of you back in Elizabethan England. So apart from penicillin, though, is there anything from our time today that you would like to take back with you and to show people then? And what do you think that they would make of it? For example, an iPhone or any other bits of technology?
Oh, you'd have to be very careful, wouldn't you? Because if you brought back even a television set that worked, you would probably be burned at the stake for witchcraft. So I'd have to be very, very careful. What would I take back? I think it would have to be medications, moisturizer as well. I think I'd have to take some things to clear up things like what's it called? Not scurvy, but scrofulousness and all those terrible skin problems that people used to have in those days, and which we forget. We're very lucky to have sort of got past.
Well, on a very hot and humid day, as we're experiencing today in New York City, I'd have to imagine you might want to take an air conditioner with you as well.
What a good idea. Air conditioner. Yes.
Yeah, and very lightweight cotton clothing.
And all the locals will be gathering around my air conditioner in absolute astonishment at this new magic.
Is there anyone you would like to meet then in Elizabethan England?
I would love to have seen the court of Elizabeth I. All the people like Robert Cecil, all the brilliant people around her. And obviously Shakespeare. I mean, to have seen him on stage would just be extraordinary. It would be, yes, absolutely mesmerizing. I'd so many questions that I have. What would he have been like on stage? How did they speak? How did they keep the audience standing in the pit, being propositioned by prostitutes and street peddlers and others? How did they keep their attention? Did they keep their attention? Right.
Do you think that they would have been surprised that his work has stood the test of time all these centuries later?
It's a really interesting question, that. All writers like to think that to some extent we're writing for posterity. To some extent, I think everybody wants to think that. There's day-to-day journalism that people write that you assume is not going to really last the length of time. One interesting thing about Shakespeare's England and Shakespeare's work is that there are many, many signs that he did think he was writing for all time. And a lot of his poetry and drama says that explicitly. What is it? Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this, my powerful rhyme. So he knew. Did his contemporaries? I imagine quite a lot of them realized what they had. But of course, it's not until after his death that they even start to put the plays together, because there wasn't the sense that we have now of the sort of authoritative volume of a writer's work. I mean, what libraries existed in those days,
Do you have a favorite Shakespeare work yourself?
Probably to watch Twelfth Night, which has just got everything in it. Comedy, tragedy, everything. It's incredibly funny, incredibly moving, and very disturbing with the revenges carried out at Malvolio. So Twelfth Night to see, probably King Lear to read, or Hamlet to read. Yeah.
In your school days, did you ever take the stage in a Shakespeare play?
Not in a Shakespeare play, no. Maybe I have a subdued Hamlet inside me somewhere.
Could be.
Not that subdued.
Did you ever think about taking the stage, or that even as a career?
I was actually maybe a little bit. Yes. I mean, I could do it. I don't know how well, but I mean, I think I could do it back then. I know one of the things that put me off was doing runs, even just amateurly. Runs of plays struck me as being not as much fun as you thought, because first night, thrilling. Second night, oh, we're doing this again.
It just becomes rote.
It becomes rote. And I know a lot of actors who have their own ways of getting through that. But live performance, obviously, is just thrilling. But yeah, I did worry about that. And then I just became a writer incredibly early, really, because I wrote my first book when I was 17, 18. And it came out when I was 20. And then my life as a writer took off, and everything else fell away.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about your book in just a sec. Just one or two more points about your travel to Elizabethan England on your one-way ticket destination of choice. What would you want to tell them about our time today, Douglas? And what do you think would surprise them most?
I suppose in some ways, I mean, I take the view that history is always the same. I mean, there's nothing new once you understand the basics of human nature. There's nothing that can really surprise you. I don't think they'd have been so idiotic in the early 1600s, for instance, to have thought that war would go away.
You mean that war?
Any war.
War in general.
War in general,
Yeah.
you know. I think it's so hard because in a way, of course, we do progress, but only in certain ways as societies. I think they would have been surprised that we had religious tolerance because that did not exist then. I mean, to the extent that whether you were Protestant or Catholic was a matter of life or death. I think they'd be rather surprised that this is a rather positive thing to say, but to an extent we managed to get on. We could sort of agree, you to your gods, me to mine. I think that would have amazed many of the people then who were literally willing to be burnt at the stake to not give up, for instance, their particular interpretation of the meaning of the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. It seems extraordinary to the modern mind.
In the arc of the British Empire, because that was the beginning of the age of exploration,
yes.
I wonder what they would have made of the expansion of Britain throughout the world and then the loss of empire.
Absolutely. All of that would have been absolutely bewildering. I mean, nobody knew about the wider world. We knew so little in those days. Right. I mean, one of the examples I often think of is that when Christopher Columbus sets out to try to find a new route to China, he carries a letter from the King of Spain addressed to the leader of China as the Khan. But the Chinese had not used Khan as a name for the emperor for 200 years. And that's because nobody in Europe had got to China since Marco Polo. So we knew nothing about each other. It's one of the things that, yes, makes it thrilling living in the modern age when you and I can, for relatively little money, get on an airplane almost anywhere.
Absolutely. And then final question really on your destination of choice before we get onto your book. Is that something that you've really thought about, though, before I even asked you the question? I mean, had you entertained the idea or wondered what it would have been like going back in time then?
Well, I hadn't particularly thought about it. I mean, there are lots of times I would have loved seeing. I've just spent much of the summer reading a new translation of the Odyssey. So I would also, if Homer's characters were real, I wouldn't have minded being at the sack of Troy either.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, again, there's no coming back.
No. Oh, yeah, that's
right.
True. Well, there's not much coming back. Well, there's a long coming back for Odysseus. So,
right. Yeah. Indeed. All right. Well, listen, do send us a postcard from Elizabethan England.
I will do.
It'll
be in quill.
I'd love that. Yes, I'm sure you have wonderful penmanship, and do send our very best regards to the Bard.
I will.
All right. Well, listen, speaking of all things literary, again, congratulations on Democracies and Death, Cults, Israel, and the Future of Civilization. I absolutely plowed through the book. It was just such a fascinating read. And you know how the night before an exam, I don't know if you have this in the United Kingdom or not, this old wives' tale that you want to put the book, your textbook, underneath your pillow, and then you sleep on it. So then the next day when you take the exam, you remember everything that's in the book.
I've not tried it, but I'm sure it works.
Well, I'm sure it works also. I did not try it with your book, but I very much wanted to because I wanted to remember literally every single thing that was in this book. I really enjoyed it. And I want to hopscotch through the book and just pick out a couple of points to discuss in the time that we have. Douglas, in the first that I want to talk about is something that you had brought up that Yuval Biton said. Yuval Biton, for our dear audience, was the dentist, the doctor that saved Yahya Sinwar's life. And he talked about the insight, he shared the insight that what Sinwar was about, what Hamas was about, it wasn't about politics, it was about religion. And at another point in the book, you talk about the notion that this sliver of land, this Jewish state, which is that sliver of land, is an absolute affront to Muslims. And I'm wondering if you can connect the dots there for our audience, because I don't think people realize that.
Yes, that's the story of the Jewish Israeli dentist who spotted that Sinwar, the architect of the October 7th attacks, the account of that he gave and that I describe in the book of being in the prison with Sinwar was very haunting to me, because he spotted, this is when Sinwar was in prison in the 2000s. He was in prison in Israel because he had killed Palestinians with his bare hands, and indeed on one occasion with a kafir, the same terrorist sheik that people now adopt on American streets. Sinwar had been found guilty of murdering Palestinians and so was imprisoned in an Israeli jail. And after some time, he was spotted by this dentist. He was having trouble balancing. He was falling over and getting up from prayers and things. So the dentist realized something was wrong and sends him off to the local specialist hospital that diagnoses that Sinwar had a very serious brain tumor. And Jewish doctors successfully performed a removal of the tumor, and Sinwar survived. Fast forward another couple of years, and the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit had been abducted, and Sinwar was one of more than 1,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails who were released as a swap for the one Jewish soldier. Mm-hmm. There are a number of things that pertain to that as well, one of which is that the nephew of the dentist who spotted that Sinwar was ill and saved his life, his own nephew was murdered in kibbutz near Oz on the 7th of October in the morning. Yes, the observation that for people like Sinwar, this is a religiously motivated jihad is something which I think very many people in the West do not understand. And by extension, as you say, the existence of the one Jewish state in the region for many Muslims, not all, but for many Muslims, is a significant affront. Mm-hmm. It's a religious affront. And I think because there's several things go on at the moment that to stop people understanding this. One is the presumption that all people everywhere always want the same thing, which is a pleasant but liberal belief, but also a myth. Some people want things very different from what we want in societies like America, Britain, Europe. And foremost among them are groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Revolutionary Government in Tehran. They actually do have a different view of the world and what we're meant to be doing in it, and different orders of value, different priorities, and very, very ancient bigotries. And perhaps the foremost among them, I mean, I've very often heard over the years from Jewish and Christian friends, why is it that Israel is such a just litmus issue? Why, of all of the wars and the horrible conflicts that have gone on around the world in our lifetimes, why is it always this one that seems to get so many people's ire up? And one of the answers is not the only answer, but one of the answers is because this goes back 1,400 years at least, when the Jewish tribes were among the first to reject the purported revelations of Muhammad that are the start of Islam. Mm-hmm. And that rejection runs very deep and and it's the cause of much textual and other problems within Islam, within Islamic traditions. But it's one of the drivers, not the only one by any means, but one of the drivers of the very, very deep feelings that many people have about the existence of the Jewish state.
Building on that idea of it being an affront, there was a story that you had in the book where you were going across the October 6th bridge in Cairo. And I want you to share that story. And when I was reading that, the big question that came for me, Douglas, was how do you begin even to change people's minds, their thought processes, when they've been fed such rubbish or lies for decades and they've just been fed it since childhood, really?
Yes. Well, we know that in closed societies you can mislead a population much more easily than in an open society. In communist China, they still try to keep the amount of information available to know pretty strictly censored. In North Korea, where I was some years ago, they have a very, very strict. I mean, they really are world leaders in suppressing what the population can know.
And I lived in China, by the way, for 7 years. So.
Right. I mean, it's extraordinary. But by the way, once when coming from the bridge from over the bridge from North Korea to China, I said to the friends I was with, "Isn't it wonderful to breathe the freedom of China?"
Yes.
But you know,
share that October 6th story, though.
Yeah. Well, you see, the interesting thing about that is that there are societies which are seem to be much more open than, for instance, communist China or the Kim's North Korea. And in Egypt, some years ago, before the the anti-Mubarak revolution, I remember I was with some very, very cool Cairo friends. And yes, one day we'd crossed the 6th of October Bridge, down 6th of October Highway. Went to see a new apartment. One of them was thinking of buying in 6th of October City. And I said eventually, well, what's all this 6th of October business? And we'd been out, in the clubs of Cairo. We'd been to bars, and everyone was very Western and traveled, as well. Some of them had been to Paris and so on. My Cairo friends, and one of them said, the 6th of October is to commemorate our victory over the Israelis. And I said to him, but which victory over the Israelis? And I realized he was talking about the Yom Kippur War. And I said to him, but as carefully as one could, but politely, but I said, but you didn't beat the Israelis. And he said, and I told him the history. He said, I thought we whipped their ass. I said, I'm afraid they whipped your ass. But it's a sort of little window into something that I've seen often in travels around that region, which is the simple misleading stories that people have been told, not just about the State of Israel since 1948, but the Arab side, it becomes a Palestinian side, the pre-1948, everything that is forgotten or covered over. Just huge amounts of misinformation and indoctrination, which is one of the scariest things in the region. It's obviously been one of the most lamentable failures of Hamas in Gaza since 2005, but also of the international community in failing to educate a new generation of Gazan Palestinians into living beside their neighbor rather than trying to annihilate their neighbor. But so much of this, from the most liberal citizens of Cairo to the most beleaguered populations of Gaza, these false stories and misinformation is just rife. Much more so, I think, than most people in the West could possibly imagine.
And is there a way of turning it around?
I hope so. I mean, but it would be education.
Yeah.
But who can you trust? I mean, the UN has proved so lamentable at it. Who would you trust to actually sensibly and reasonably give an account of even recent history that was not completely fallacious and intended to set the fires burning again?
Well, yeah, I mean, because, again, as Syria is on the dawn of a new chapter, one can only hope that, again, with increased exposure to the outside world and maybe even a modicum of exposure to anything outside of what they've been used to, that maybe there might be a hint of change even in a place like that.
It's possible. I mean, the big what if that still remains is with Iran.
Yeah.
If the government of Iran were to change, or to be replaced by something that didn't preach jihad and try to spread violence all across the region and try to colonize country after country in the region, the whole region could be different.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that you brought up in the book, and I'm so glad that you did, and I don't want to say on a lighter note because it's not so light, but actually the entertainment world and their response to October 7th. And I'm glad, and these are my words, not yours, that this is not their first rodeo, okay, when it comes to Israel bashing. And I'm so glad you brought up Vanessa Redgrave from the 1970s, because in her love affair with the PLO, because I'm old enough to remember that, Douglas, and I think that was the first time I ever heard what the PLO was even all about was through Vanessa Redgrave as a child. So just saying. But so this isn't their first rodeo. And we do have to salute those that have spoken out. Patricia Heaton, Deborah Messing,
Yeah,
David
absolutely.
Schwimmer, and Jerry Seinfeld in those. However, it would seem that the lion's share of people in the entertainment world have either been silent or else have been very much pro-Hamas. And so I'm just wondering, have you been able to divorce a performer's politics from their performance? Because I'm having real trouble in that department.
It's really hard. Vanessa Redgrave is quite a good example. Lovely, lovely actress. Hideous human being.
Yes.
Hideous. All the Redgraves are like that. They were all
Even Lynn Redgrave.
Yes, they were.
Really?
All, I think, as far as I know, I may have defamed him. I once met Corin years ago. He was also a lovely actor, political, ignoramus, and wicked, among other things. Members of an extraordinarily far-left socialist party that broke off. The leader of it was a rapist, raped women. The Redgraves all covered over for it. It's disgusting. Jerry Healy, that was his name, the man, the leader of literally a political cult. I am able to do it, but it's hard, isn't it? I mean, a performer has to be somebody who really love their work in order to look past that. But I mean, that's always been a problem. That's why it would be so wonderful if actors just shut up about politics. I admire the people who sort of stood up and said in the last 2 years, look, our profession isn't all pro-Hamas. Some of us like the democracy of Israel more than we like the death cult of Hamas. I do admire the people who do that, but I don't think even they should have to do it. There is a presumption that because people are famous, they should have their opinions thought on anything and everything, and it's a symbiotic relationship, because the culture wants it for the entertainment value, the news value, and the individual is lured into it because it's rather flattering, So, you who starred in a sitcom in the 2010s, what do you think the solution to the problem in the Middle East is? And but it's rather flattering, and the less intelligent ones, I think, will fall into thinking that their opinion matters. I was rather proud of a former schoolmate of mine, Eddie Redmayne, who some years ago was interviewed on radio in the UK, and they asked his opinion about something political, and he said, "I don't know. I'm an actor. I'm just an actor."
Good on him.
And I thought, oh, well done.
Finally.
Well done.
Right.
But it is hard. I mean, there is an explanation, by the way, as to why. It's funny, since we started off with the Edinburgh, there is an explanation as to why celebrities, actors, and others do that, which is that they have, at some level, they have a sense that what they're doing is not as meaningful as it might be.
Interesting.
And it's not the real gig. For instance, you quite often notice that guys who play tough guys in movies like to be tough guys off set as well, but they're never as tough, of course, as they are in the movie. There is something slightly. I've known a lot of actors. I think there's something. I wouldn't say lack of fulfillment, but I'd say trouble with chasing fulfillment that they all have, and that's not just about the whether you're on top of your game. It's about whether you're actually relevant and much more. But it's a very strange thing that. By the way, there's also a psychological explanation, which is that acting, like writing and many other things, these are activities that lend themselves to a certain type of mindset, tend to be a more liberal, open mindset, tend to put a higher estimation on what one might regard as more feminine virtues like empathy and endless things like that. And therefore, you don't get the kind of sterner, boundary-seeking people within these orbits. Or if you do, they pipe down. But it is one of the great oddities of our age that the kind people, the love is love people, the be kind people, are the people who are the worst harridans and tornadoes when it comes to really, as I say in this book, really quite straightforward ones. Everything starts the day before everything. So saying, the world didn't start on October the 7th is true, and also a complete cop-out, because the very interesting question, in a way, which the book starts from, is when an atrocity like that I document in the book, when that happens, if your first thought on hearing that young people at a dance party in the early hours of the morning, raped, beheaded, tortured, kidnapped, shot in the genitals, much more, if your first thought is, well, those kids had it coming, something about your own center of gravity is badly off.
Indeed. And interestingly, you brought up in the book that October 7th really happened several times before. The Bataclan in Paris, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, the Ariana Grande concert in, where was it, in Manchester?
Exactly, in Manchester, England.
And people did not connect the dots.
No.
And they still haven't.
No, I mean, look at the fact that the worst music festival in the world, Glastonbury, happened just a couple of weeks ago. That was a music festival, like the Nova Party was a music festival. The people who were at Glastonbury this year had the luxury of calling for death to the IDF and to indigenous people in Britain, as it happens. But that's partly because the people at Glastonbury this year were lucky enough not to have Hamas come in the early hours of the morning whilst they're on mind-altering drugs and rape the women and gang rape them and butcher others and slit their heads open with knives and cave in their craniums with hammers. If that had have happened at Glastonbury, they might have taken a different view about groups like Hamas. But in the meantime, these sorts of people not only sleep on, which is one thing, but actually blame the victims, which is where ignorance becomes something which is, I think, morally repulsive.
Indeed. Switching gears, the media. You've gone on many a show that has been very hostile towards Israel, that's hostile towards Douglas Murray. By the way, you've gone on, Sky News Australia with Rita, whom I adore. I think she's wonderful.
Great. She's not anti-Douglas Murray.
She's not. That's why I say that's the flip side. But she is absolutely wonderful, and I love her personality, and she knows what she's talking about. But you've gone on this media that, again, is very hostile. And I'm just wondering, Douglas, when you leave the studio, when the cameras stop rolling, what are those conversations like with the presenter or the producers? Do they really believe what they're spewing out?
It's hard to know. I mean, my own view generally is if people say something, you believe them. You know, there's an awful lot of sort of thinking in our time, which is, X must only think Y because of Z. Sometimes X just thinks Y because that's what they think.
Right.
That having been said, there is the algorithm in the media of our time definitely favors certain stories and certain, not just points of view, but certain ways of behaving. The algorithm on YouTube that will be, X destroys Y is much more appealing to people than X has a fruitful conversation with Y. And so people who chase the algorithm, chase the clicks, simply because they have to for monetization, say Tucker Carlson or Piers Morgan.
Candace Owens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they believe to some extent. I mean, it's different in different cases, but I mean, certainly with Piers Morgan, I mean, it's he needs the clicks, and so he needs the outrage machine to work. And but I mean, that some people will think that makes him a bad guy. I just think that is what it is.
It's just part of the business model.
For him, it's part of the business model. I think there are other people who are bad actors out there, but I think the media is just a very strange landscape at the moment. I have managed in my career to keep a foot always in the traditional media because I respect it and I like it, and because I think that although a lot of the old media has let people down in certain ways, we haven't all let the public down. It's not everyone. And there's also a great value to good old-fashioned journalism and research. And that's what I do in my books as well as my writing of articles is to try to see things with my own eyes. But everybody has a risk in this age as well of a type of audience capture where you just do what you think your audience want you to do. Whereas in fact, there is a great joy in introducing audiences to things they didn't know which are also not horse shit.
That's why I like doing this show.
Yeah.
Exactly, because you get to introduce people and books and concepts that they might not have heard of before. Another concept in a quote, actually, that you had in the book that I've heard you speak about in other environments, and I want you to expand on, Vasily Grossman's quote, which I absolutely love. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of.
Yeah. He's obviously one of the heroes of this book,
Yeah.
posthumously, and all that. Grossman is a captivating writer, Soviet Jewish journalist, author of one of the great books of the 20th century, Life and Fate. And I'm so pleased that this line, which I read when I first read Life and Fate some years ago, and just threw itself off the page.
As we say, Douglas, it was a light bulb moment.
It was a light bulb moment, because in the middle of Life and Fate, this 900-page novel about the midnight of the 20th century between Stalingrad and Treblinka, thinking on the minds of Churchill and thinking on the minds, he doesn't think of Churchill, but he principally at one point thinks on the minds of Stalin and Hitler, as they almost have telepathy between each other after the Battle of Stalingrad. In the midnight of the 20th century, Vasily Grossman devotes 3 or 4 pages of the novel to the question of anti-Semitism, and it's a titanic passage which says basically everything you need to know about a very complicated, important subject. And as he says at one point, that everything about anti-Semitism, the anti-Semite, is that they tell you nothing about the Jews, but everything about themselves. And then he goes to this great aphorism. He says, "Tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of." I'm extremely moved to hear that people buying on Democracies and Death Cults on Amazon, one of the books that's recommended now because of the number of people who bought it as a result of reading my book, is Vasily Grossman's Life and Fate. I'm extremely moved if I can do anything to push more people to reading that masterpiece. But that insight of Grossman's seems to me extraordinarily important. There are lots of hatreds and bigotries that effectively are projection mechanisms. And anti-Semitism is one of the classics, that, as Grossman says, that the Nazis in the 1930s and 40s said that the Jews were racists who wanted to take over the world. Projection much? And it's the same in our own day. The revolutionary Islamic government in Tehran accuses the Israeli government of being a colonialist power. But it's the mullahs who've been oppressing the Iranian people since 1979 who are the colonial power of the era in the Middle East, colonizing Yemen, colonizing Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq. And this rule just keeps on working. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of.
I love that. I mean, that's a real light bulb moment, and I really wanted to share that because I thought that it was really a seminal point that was brought out in the book.
And just to add, the follow-on, the slight twist on Grossman's law that I give, which I was very very proud in a way to have got to, because often when you're thinking on a problem for years, you circle it like a whirlpool in the bath plug, and then you get the point. And this problem I'd been circling for a while which came out after October 7th, which is why are these people, for instance, on elite educational campuses in the US and elsewhere in the West, why are they so keen to throw their lot in, not with the Palestinian cause, but with Hamas, Hezbollah, Nasrallah, Khamenei? And why are students just the other week at Princeton University chanting "Glory to our martyrs"? Our martyrs? And that's when I realized that, well, of course, all the things that the students of these elite institutions are chanting, and people on the streets like those not far away from us here in New York have been chanting as well, because it's not just elite institutions. What they chant, what they accuse the Jewish state of is colonialism, ethnic cleansing, genocide, white supremacy, etc. These are all things that these predominantly young people have been taught that they are guilty of. that they, by dint of being born in America in the 21st century, are guilty of colonialism, ethnic cleansing, genocide, white supremacy, and all this sort of thing. And I addressed that educational phenomenon in my previous book, In the War on the West. But what I realized after the 7th of October was that this unanswerable problem that young Americans in particular were being put into. You're guilty of something you haven't done, but people who look like you on this land centuries before did do, or may have done. I said that's going to create a psychological problem because there's no alleviation of this. There's no way out. And then since the 7th of October, we've seen what the way out. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of. I'll tell you what you've been taught you're guilty of. And then one understands why the hollering and why the rage and why the extraordinary behavior of erstwhile intelligent or certainly very privileged people. They use the Jewish state as a mechanism on which to project all of their taught inadequacies and probably real inadequacies at this point as well.
Are we at a turning point, Douglas?
The world's always at a turning point.
I just have to say, because I reread The War on the West ahead of our conversation. Of course, I read On Democracies and Death Cults, and I thought, my gosh, you really called it in The War on the West, and also, in your other books as well.
Well, it's, you can't see very far into the future, and only a fool thinks they can see clearly. You can tell. You can see certain trends emerge. Demographics, for instance, are certainly something on which you can base some guess about where a society will be. But I mean, anyone is a fool who thinks they can see very far into the future. You can predict some trends, but you've got to be very careful with specifics. Look at the year that we've just had. We only just passed the 1-year anniversary of the assassination attempt on President Trump. That was just over a year ago.
It's crazy.
Think about what happened in the weeks after that. The president drops out of the race. President Biden drops out of the race. Kamala Harris enters the race. Donald Trump wins the election, and everything. That was just a few months.
It's exhausting, isn't it?
I mean,
life is exhausting.
Well, it can be,
but it's
exhausting.
It's exhilarating. It's exhilarating.
Exactly.
Because, as I said at the top of the show, no joke, the first thing that I look at after I wake up is I look at the New York Post.
It's a very good idea.
Right? I look at the New York Post, I look at because I have the app, and I look at what the main story is there, and then I go to the cover because, of course, God loves those covers, Yes. I mean, I think they're absolutely brilliantly written.
No, it's a great paper.
But I say to myself every day, truly, we are living in such exhilarating times.
Yes. I mean, one has to have a sort of attitude towards your age. It can't be that, I mean, there are a lot of people who've been taught into a sort of, you get this on the left and the right now, a sort of taught cynicism, and you sort of think, oh, come on, what do you know? I mean, if you're 80-something and you've lived a really rackety life, you might be able to treat yourself to being a bit cynical. You've got no right to be a cynic in your 20s.
Are you generally an optimistic person?
I don't think there's any such thing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any
Expand.
My view is that we're optimistic or pessimistic depending on the question you're asked at a particular time of day in a particular phase of your life. Shimon
Peres said there are two types of people, optimists and pessimists, but it's more fun to go through life as an optimist.
Yes, I mean, I have a kind of brake mechanism on such a phrase, which is never forget how much damage can be done by willful optimism. There's an enormous amount of damage that can be done by willful pessimism, absolutely. But there's also an amount of damage that can be done by willful optimism.
True.
If you just say, well, it just has to go well, and you go, you want to bet? Let me count the ways in which it might not. But I think one has to always have a sort of, you strive to, as a writer and as any human being, you strive to have a sort of reasonable attitude.
I suppose it's about being a realist.
Well, the realist I also push back on because almost nobody says they're a surrealist or an irrealist.
Except Dali's, I suppose.
Dali, of course, but you know that didn't really catch on very widely, and so I don't even think realist. Almost everyone would think they're a kind of realist. Very few people think of themselves as fantasists. Right. Now, my attitude. There's a beautiful quote of Schiller's. He wrote somewhere. He said, "Be a part of your time, but do not be its creature."
Oh, interesting.
It's a beautiful phrase.
It really is. It is. Douglas, just a couple more quick bases because I'm mindful of the clock in your time. Indeed, I want to ask you the same question that I asked Asita Kanko, the European Member of Parliament, when she was on. Isn't she fabulous?
She's amazing. I saw her a couple of years ago in Belgium. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, she was on the program a couple months ago, and I asked her to share what's a story or something that isn't on our radar but really should be on our radar. And I'm wondering if you have anything that comes to mind.
It's so hard because, I mean, I don't know. It would be slightly audacious for me to say because there's so much in the media. There's so much that's covered. It depends what papers you read. It depends if you read widely enough. I try to read all the sort of panopticon of political views out there. I suppose there's the things I think need to be brought out more. I tend to be the things I write about. That's one of the reasons I write them, is to bring them to more attention and to help people, I hope, including myself, to better understand them. I can't think of a single story that isn't being covered because...
or something that should get more attention, shall we say.
Well, there are endless numbers of things that should get more attention. I mean... there's so many things that should. I mean, for instance, how much do we know on a day-to-day basis about China's actual, basically, colonialism in Africa these days?
It's interesting
the mineral fight.
Douglas, it's interesting you said that because her answer was what Russia and China are doing in the Sahel region.
There you go.
So okay,
I mean, so there will be things, but then there are very, very fine journalists who are covering that. It's just that it's a less sexy subject than other ones that might spring to mind.
Right. No pressure, but what's your next book?
I never talk about the book I'm thinking about or writing, and it's...
Are you writing a book now?
I'm in the gestation process.
Okay.
My thing with books is that I believe they're rather like target practice. You have to sort of, you line up, you can see it coming, or you as the author can feel it coming. You can see the pigeon or clay pigeon coming into sight, and then you've got to make sure you've got an absolutely accurate before you fire.
Okay.
But my real reason to never talk about anything that I'm working on when I'm working on it is a profound, not really superstition. It's a piece of advice I was given many years ago by a very seminal person in my life, a great Persian writer called Shushagapi, who died many years ago, and she was a wonderful writer. And she once said to me, she said, "Douglas, my dear, you must be very, very careful about talking a book out." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, in the cafes of Paris in the 1950s and 60s, there were so many people, mainly men, who sat in the cafes talking about the book that they were writing, sometimes the books they were writing, and they never wrote the books. They talked them out in the cafes of the left bank. And I've seen that happen with people. There's something strange about the formation process with any work, which is that you have to keep it between you and the page until it's time to show anyone else. Because the dialogue you have, in my experience writing a book, the dialogue is in your own mind and working things out. The minute you introduce anyone else to it, then people will say things like, "Hey, I don't know, how about starting like this?" Or "How about that?" And then everything else would crowd in. And also it's about the passion of it. I mean, one of the things I hope comes across in all my books is my deep intellectual and other passion for what I'm writing about. And I do think that if I talked about it endlessly before writing, some of the passion would be lost. And that's as I say, it's not quite superstition because I think it's true.
It's your process.
It's my process, yes.
Yes. So as we really wind down our conversation right now, in your book, The War on the West, you dedicated it to your godchildren. And I'm just wondering, when Uncle Douglas is in advanced years on the porch, sitting in his rocking chair, what would he, if you have a rocking chair?
What an image. Everything in me bristles. But yes, okay, I'll go along with the image.
You get the picture.
Yes,
you get the picture.
I've got the disgusting picture you've laid up.
Okay.
Yes.
You've got an Afghan over you and it's chilly outside.
The dog or the person? What?
Both. Why not? Do you know what an Afghan is? Like a blanket.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Right.
You've got the Afghan.
I'm glad to have clarified that.
Yes. Okay. And you can have an Afghan dog by your side. How's that? What would you like to tell your godchildren's children about the moment that we're living in right now?
Well, I think I'd fall back on a quote, because it's one that has seen me through, and I'm sure will see them through as well, which is a quotation from C.S. Lewis's great sermon given in the University Church at Oxford in the fall of 1939. It's called Learning in Wartime. And he says human life was always lived on the edge of a precipice. It's a delusion, basically. This is Mrs. Me speaking behind, but it's a delusion to think that the times one in are uniquely dangerous or uniquely febrile. And he points out, even if you look back at the 19th century in Europe, which in the middle of the century looks relatively calm by 20th century standards, even then the whole time was filled with alarms, crises, panics, plagues. Nothing looks stable as you're going through it. And so really a piece of advice I quite often have given to people, and I would hope would see subsequent generations through as well, is to say, but the important thing in this, therefore, is not to put off what you should be doing with your life until the situation is optimal, because the situation will never be optimal. And as Lewis says, if human beings had put off the search for truth and beauty until the situation was optimal, the search would never have begun. So that I think that is for me has often been a very useful way through things, through plagues and alarms and crises and wars and much more, is just to not allow the times to distract you from what you should do in them. Probably goes back to the Schiller quote as well. There are times when alarm is necessary, but alarmism is a type of narcissistic pathology very often, you see, because people think, oh, well, I'm so incredibly important to be living in these unusually important times, but that's just narcissism,
Indeed. All right. On that note, we're going to leave right there. Douglas Murray, we want to thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of the One Way Ticket Show. I hope this is one of many times that you'll join us, and especially after your next book comes out, whatever it shall be.
You bet.
All right. Once again, Douglas's latest book on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. You can pick up a copy wherever you like to buy your books, and indeed, I hope that you do. All right, and we'll have info about Douglas on the show notes page of this very episode on our website, theonewayticketshow.com. We'll also have links to his books as well, so you can check them out there too. And I do invite you to shoot me an email, Steven@theonewayticketshow.com. That's Steven with a V, Steven@theonewayticketshow.com. Do share your one-way ticket destination of choice, whether it's to Elizabethan England or somewhere else. Maybe you'll see Douglas there. But in any event, do shoot me that email, Steven@theonewayticketshow.com. Meantime, it's a wrap for this edition of the One Way Ticket Show. For Douglas Murray and the entire crew, I'm Steven Shalowitz, and we'll see you next time.